Coming up on the Sports Reporters.
Also, he's proven right. Knowing Belichick, he's sitting back going, look, I spent my whole career saying the establishment and the league office were out to get me, and the media were a bunch of idiots. And, well, here we go, Bill. Yeah, right. Touche, buddy. You won.
He can have that in his induction speech.
Welcome to the Sports Reporters. Bill Belichick, 6 Super Bowl wins as a head coach, 17 division titles, third on the all-time wins list, denied entry into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in his first year of eligibility. That is the big story today. It broke Tuesday afternoon, and it was broken by our Don Van Natta and Seth Wickersham. They are joining us, as is Dan Wetzel, who wrote a stinging rebuke of the decision to deny Belichick enshrinement, which you can now find on ESPN.com. So, gentlemen, this is interesting. 50 voters, you need 40 votes to get in for enshrinement. And I can't remember a situation where someone being denied was such a big deal. Seth, let's start with you. How did this happen? How are we in this situation right now where Bill Belichick, arguably the greatest football coach ever, arguably the greatest coach ever, is not going into Canton?
Yeah, I mean, I think that when Don and I found out about this, we were met with, as much surprise as you see on social media, maybe fewer swear words, but we were equally shocked. And in fact, we're skeptical that this had actually happened, that maybe the tip that we had gotten was inaccurate. But it was true. And, the reason I think is not, I think there's a couple of reasons. I think that, number one, I think that the Patriots cheating scandals, and particularly Spygate, came up in the conversation. And I think that some voters held that against him. But one of the more interesting stories is that, this is kind of a process story. And he is part of a category that's combined contributors to the game and senior candidates. So you have a room where Bill Belichick is up against not only people like Robert Kraft, but people like Ken Anderson, the Bengals quarterback in the 70s. And so it's a very kind of convoluted.
And you can only vote for 3. You
can only vote for 3. And so you need 40 out of 50 votes to make it. And you can see a scenario where people didn't vote for Bill because of they just didn't want to. You have people who didn't vote for Bill because they thought he would get in, and so they wanted to try to pump up other candidates. And this matrix of all of these voters voting for 3 different people all kind of colluded to keep him out.
And Don, right, the process, a couple of weeks ago, they get together, the voters, and they talk about the different candidates. And some people, present cases in favor. Some people present cases that are not as strong or decline to endorse certain candidates. What do we know about what actually happened when they were talking about Bill Belichick?
Well, you're right, Jeremy. They met for 8 hours on January 13th, 2 weeks ago, and it's a secret process. Everything about this lacks transparency. The votes themselves are supposed to be confidential. The discussions are supposed to be confidential, but our reporting shows that Spygate and Deflategate were both mentioned in the context of Bill Belichick. Though I spoke to somebody just this morning, one of the voters, who said that he assumed, and many people assumed, that Belichick was a lock, and they're stunned. I mean, the fact that 11 people, at least, possibly more, did not vote for Bill Belichick to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, second all-time win list, 8 Super Bowls, 6 as head coach of the Patriots, 2 as defensive coordinator for the Giants, is stunning. And when that tip first came in, Belichick got the call Friday afternoon. And within a couple of hours,
the call that he wasn't in, the call saying
he got the call that he was not in from the Hall. A courtesy call came to him. And I got the tip. The first tip came, within hours of that, and I almost fell off my chair. I did not believe it, and it's stunning. And as Seth said, we didn't believe it as we were pursuing it. It's mind-boggling. And so the punishment here is clearly Spygate, mostly because this is a scandal. People have long memories. One of the voters, the Hall of Famer Bill Polian, the former general manager of the Colts, He remembers it now. We're going to get into Polian, and I spoke to him last night. He can't remember remarkably whether he voted for Belichick or not. He told me.
Post that, Don. I was like, Bill Polian can't remember. I mean, that's always possible, right? But if you're voting on this, and we're not talking about 500 candidates, we're talking about 5, right?
It's 5, yes. And he remembers vividly voting for Kraft, and Polian has been a big, ardent supporter of Kraft for years. Believes he belongs in the Hall of Fame, has said to me, and has also said to his fellow voters, that Kraft knew nothing about Spygate. Polian is convinced of that. In fact, he even told me last night that he told that to voters during the deliberations. I asked him, well, what did you say, if anything, about Belichick? And he said nothing. So take that for what it's worth as well. So, Polian has a lot of juice, I believe, with some of those voters. He's 83, but I find it stunning that he's only 95% sure he voted for Belichick. And also L.C. Greenwood, the great defensive player of the Steel Curtain of the Steelers, the 4 Super Bowl champion Steelers of the 70s. He couldn't remember for 100% certainty that he voted for L.C. Greenwood. He only knows for sure that he voted for Robert Kraft, who he has desperately wanted to get in the Hall of Fame for years.
Dan.
Yeah. Listen, when my kids tell me they're 95% sure they did or didn't do something, you automatically know the 5% is the accurate one.
Right.
Give me a break, Polian. No one's buying that story. It was 2 weeks ago.
But what's interesting, people are
Yeah.
ripping the writers, and the vast majority of the voters are writers, but Bill Polian's one of the 5 who aren't media members, who are former executives, coaches, players, and he's in he's in that category. I don't know. I mean, Dan, this is
part of the problem with this thing, and I don't think the media should be involved at all in these things. And one of the reasons is because the media gets dragged into this, and the media, when it comes to this slate of voters, is a loose term. Okay, there is a high quality group of people in there that I know pretty much every single person on this. I trust they do a great job. All that. There are some gong show candidates on this list. Okay, we could update the list, but anyway, Polian 2 weeks ago doesn't remember on a 3-person ballot. This isn't one of these like, did you vote for dog catcher, this guy back in 2008? I don't remember. He come on. This is all. It's the process. It's this. You guys screwed it up. Your job as the voter is not to be, I'm going to play retroactive morality police and add a punishment that the NFL either doesn't think is deserved or is too cowardly to do on their own. That's not your job as a voter. Okay.
And the other part of it, Dan, that's here, I think, is obviously Belichick was truculent with the media for years. Is that part of it? Like, let's not let him have the honor of being a first ballot Hall of Famer. There's plenty of time left for him to do it. Robert Kraft, there are people in that room that feel Kraft, who's 84 years old. This is his 14th year that Kraft is up. It's the first time, remarkably, that Kraft is a finalist. So Kraft has paid all sorts of, he's been in sort of purgatory with the voters for a long time for lots of different things connected to the Patriots dynasty that those voters remember. And it's a glimpse of why they didn't vote in Belichick, because Kraft is still on the outside looking in after all these years. But
that's not a criteria either.
It's
We're not here to do criteria on which guys waited longer, which guy's my friend, which guy was nice to me or wasn't nice to me, which guy is my rival that I had to compete against. Like, if you were going on a jury on a murder trial, you wouldn't let your arch enemy from the Colts be on the jury. You get to strike him off. So the media shouldn't be involved, but then the whole thing falls apart. This thing's a joke. He should be in the Hall. I mean, there's no Hall of Fame without Bill Belichick. They've smeared the thing the whole year. There's going to be good people that deserve to get in. Drew Brees, he's going to get in, right? Deserved Hall of Famer, I would imagine, gets in. It's who's not there that's going to be the problem. So, I think it's gone clown show.
It is, and I think that, like, even though the Hall of Fame didn't want this story out, and it has nothing to do with the fact that we wrote this story. I think in a weird way, it might help the person who gets in next week when they get announced, assuming that we don't break it beforehand, because otherwise the outrage over it being anybody but Belichick would have completely
You think it's going to
overwhelmed that
dissipate?
moment.
It might only grow.
I think that it's gonna remain for some people, but I think that like when Dan Marino got into the Hall of Fame, the weekend that he was there, every time he went in with Steve Young, every time he did an interview, he was asked about having not won a Super Bowl, and that hovered over his entire weekend, and really what should have been like the crowning moment for an outstanding career. And I think that the Belichick cloud will hang over whoever gets in, no matter what. But I think that like the outrage part of it, I think will recede a little bit by the fact that we had this story yesterday.
Now, look, we talked about a lot of possible reasons, right? The process. You can only vote for 3 at a time. People might have assumed, oh, this guy's voting for him, I don't have to vote for him. Spygate, Deflategate, Robert Kraft also being a finalist at the same time. Maybe that's splitting some votes. But what about, the actual, and maybe this is ridiculous, right? Because we're talking about a guy who won 6 Super Bowls as a head coach, but that long running debate, was it Bill or was it Tom? And what happened after Tom Brady left the Patriots, Bill Belichick's record pre and post Tom Brady, we've talked about for the last 5-6 years. Does it diminish him? Now, again, you would say, how could that possibly keep him out of Canton? But is that part of it? Maybe in the mind of 1 or 2 people, which is all that it took?
That guy's an idiot then. This is,
Right.
You can make that debate on, is Bill Belichick the greatest coach of all time?
Right.
If you want to sit there and say Brady was why he's not the greatest, I'm going to go with whoever. The bar to get in as a coach. I'm sorry to drag some of these guys. Don Coryell won 3 playoff games in his entire career.
Right.
And never made a Super Bowl, and he is in the Hall of Fame. If that is a deserved Hall of Fame member who won 3, you know what the biggest ding you can come on Belichick? He lost the 2nd most Super Bowls of all time. He lost 3 Super Bowls. Like,
right.
That the bar is, that's just absurd. So anybody who does that, and that's the problem with this, you're hunting for ways to keep him out. Or if you're sitting there saying, well, I'm going to game up my ballot because I want another guy to get in and assume, that's not the job. You're supposed to look at the candidates and say who gets in. On that list, all due respect to the other players, it isn't even close. This is a museum about the history of football. You cannot get 3 paragraphs into the history of football without talking about Bill Belichick. He's coached either as a head coach or an assistant in over 20% of all the Super Bowls ever played. There is no NFL without Bill Belichick.
You're saying it's not a close call, Dan.
This is not a close call. But these guys will make it a close call. I guarantee you some of them did. They were like, well, come on, man.
There was clearly pearls clutching among some of the voters on Spygate. I mean, there is no question about that. Look, Spygate is a big scandal, right? Seth and I did a story in 2015 that showed that the spying operation that Belichick put in place spied on the opposing coach's signals far more often than the NFL ever figured out in the investigation, and that open and shut investigation they did. Remember, the NFL had no interest in finding out how many games Belichick had this Spygate operation going. Jeff Pash, the general counsel, went to Gillette Stadium and stomped on the evidence with his black shoes, right? With his highly polished $300 shoes in a conference room. They were never seen by the public. And Seth and I found out that many more games there was spying going on, going all the way back to the beginning of Belichick's era as Patriots head coach. And he did it in Cleveland as well. So there were some people, Jeremy, because I've talked to some of these voters that were very, very upset about Spygate and feel as if there should be some punishment here. And what was discussed outside the deliberations room, which we reported in our story yesterday, is there were some people that felt, and we attributed this to Polian. Now, Polian denied he said it, but he heard it, that there should be 1 year of penance. That was the word that was used to Seth and me, that Belichick had to serve because of Spygate. And that was clearly persuasive with some of the voters who did not, pull the lever for Bill Belichick as a first ballot Hall of Famer.
And look, there's a history of that, right? I mean, whether you're going to call it rule breaking as opposed to cheating, but Paul Hornung had to wait a long time to get in the Pro Football Hall of Fame after he was suspended for the entire 1963 season for gambling. Alex Karras, who was suspended along with Hornung, he waited until 6 years ago. And so they were punished by the NFL, and still there was further punishment when it came to their candidacies for the Hall of Fame. With Spygate, right? And the way that it is perceived now, almost 20 years later, the idea of doing penance, though, Dan, you've already stated you don't think that's legit. He served his time. His reputation was tarnished. There's that. We haven't even mentioned the mess at North Carolina. Another way in which his legacy, whether or not,
that's not pro football,
count, right?
His personal life isn't pro football. His gruff none of this matters. Look, if the NFL wants to punish somebody and say you're banned, they do it with Pete Rose, right? You're barred. I think is the MLB banned him or whatever all those years or something like that.
It was on
if you want to go ahead and do it. Let Roger Goodell stand up there and say, we are saying that Bill Belichick doesn't deserve to get in the Hall of Fame for a penance or a 3 years or 8. We need to humiliate this guy a little bit. We got to get one more dig on him. Goodell either doesn't believe it or he doesn't have the courage to do it. Why in the world would individual voters, sports writers mostly, or his rivals that he beat down all these years that have always been trying to get him, and believe all this stuff, why is it they get to take it upon themselves to say, well, according to me, I think he should do that. It's not about you. Okay. This is just, that's just the arrogance that it would take to have that perspective when you're coming up with a ballot and saying, I don't think a guy with all these accomplishments should get in the Hall of Fame because I'm just a little uncomfortable with it. Who cares who you are? And if that's your thing, where are you? Come on out and say it. But that is it. This should be a league thing. I can sit there and say, I don't think that's pass interference. I don't get to change that.
Well, Jeremy, there's now on Twitter, the Belichick 11. The public is clamoring to find out. Yeah, to find out the 11 people, the 11 voters who did not vote for Bill Belichick.
I'm 95% sure I know one of them. I'm 95% sure I got one of them.
95% sure, right?
95%. It
might not be 11. It could be nobody voted for him, as far as we know.
That's right. That's right. Well, there's some people have come out. Some of the voters have come out, despite the Hall saying that they don't want voters to talk about their votes or talk about the deliberations. Some are coming out and say, yes, I did vote for Bill Belichick.
Oh,
I think the list is up in the teens. All right. Right, Dan? We were texting about this morning.
Like, I don't need this hate. I didn't do it.
Right.
Like, I didn't do it. I didn't vote. Don't yell at me. But if I'm
Jeremy,
a guy, yeah.
But Jeremy, more broadly, this has backfired on this committee. Whatever, the 11 or 12 or 15, whatever the number is, this is a massive embarrassment to the Hall of Fame and to this committee that Bill Belichick is not a first ballot Hall of Famer. You could see the outrage among fans. You've got, fans of the Colts, fans of the Jets, fans of rivals of the Patriots saying he belongs in as a first ballot Hall of Famer. So this has backfired badly. And I think the outcome of this is we're going to see an overhaul of this entire system and potentially some of these voters losing their vote. I wouldn't be surprised by that either. That's how angry people are about this outcome.
And a lot of the people who are angry are actually some of the voters who learned about the decision through our story. And I think that something else that's interesting that's going to be a byproduct of this is that, look, there was a group of coaches who were kind of waiting for their turn. It was Holmgren, Shanahan, Tom Coughlin, and everybody knew that it's, Belichick will get in when he is eligible, and then everybody else is after that. It not only sets that group back a minimum of a year, it also adds Mike Tomlin into that group in the event that he doesn't coach, because he'll be eligible next year. And if they keep this kind of misfit of a group of candidates where it's like senior players and contributors, then there's no guarantee that a coach will get in every year. And so Belichick, we have to assume will get in next year. And then after that, it could actually be several years before a coach gets in.
What does it mean to Bill Belichick, this snub?
It means a lot to him. He is probably more than anybody that we know, a historian of the game who loves the legacy of football. I remember him lighting up on one of these documentaries, just thinking about Sid Gilman. Remember the old Chargers AFL coach? He said, "You guys are going to get into Gilman." Like, he loves Sid Gilman. He loves the history of football and the coaching trees and all of it. It's really, really important to him. I had somebody tell me who was close to him that he felt he was going to get 49 or 50 votes. He was that confident in this outcome. So when
Mariano Rivera.
And arguably he should have, absolutely. And so this was stunning to him. You know, Seth and I had the quotes in our story yesterday. You know, what does a guy got to do? You know, 6 Super Bowls are not enough. He said 6 when actually it's 8 when you count the 2 years as defensive coordinator to Bill Parcells for the Giants. It's like, what were they thinking? And so this means everything to him. And he's disappointed. He's puzzled by it. I'll be stunned if he doesn't get in next year. As much of a lock it was this year, I think with the backlash and the public outcry, we'll see Belichick getting his bust in Canton next summer in 2027.
He's getting more flowers than he would if he had just gotten in. So there's that. That's the benefit. Also, he's proven right. Knowing Belichick, he's sitting back going, look, I spent my whole career saying the establishment and the league office were out to get me, and the media were a bunch of idiots. And well, here we go, Bill.
Yeah, right.
Touche, buddy. You won.
He can have that in his induction speech.
Now,
well, it's going to be so petty and spiteful. This thing's going to be sarcastic. Oh, that speech will be great. I will help write it if he calls me. I will help write that thing.
On to Canton.
I mean, when you think about the Hall of Fame the voters rejecting Bill Belichick. Look, I personally, I had a problem. Many people had a problem with the Pro Football Hall of Fame for a long time because Jerry Kramer, one of the greatest guards ever, you know, he didn't get into the Hall of Fame until 7-8 years ago. He had to wait 45 years. Okay. A guy who was considered in his time, maybe the greatest guard ever. You know, mistakes have been made before. But with Bill Belichick not getting in, and there could be all these different reasons, a combination of all these different reasons which have led us to this moment. What's going to, you know, you said people might lose their vote. The process might change in terms of the reputation of the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And I think numerically, you could say it's the most selective of the halls of fame based on how many people played pro football and coached pro football and how many are actually enshrined. What does this do to the reputation of the hall? What is a Pro Football Hall of Fame without Bill Belichick?
Well, it's not worth having one. Let me just jump in quickly, Seth. I do want to make one point. These voters were telling on themselves with their animus toward the Patriots last year. Robert Kraft was not a finalist last year. It was the 13th year that he was not a finalist. Think of the influence that he's had in the National Football League and an owner who's won 6 Super Bowls. Last year, the voters picked Ralph Hay, one of the co-founders of the National Football League way back in 1920 at the car dealership in Ohio, as somebody who had more influence on the game than Robert Kraft. And then Hay, of course, didn't get in. So there's a deep bunch of animus among these voters. We saw it last year in that outcome and certainly saw it again this year. But as far as the reputation goes, to your question, again, I think this is a big black eye, 2 black eyes for the Hall of Fame and for these 50 voters. They're embarrassed by it. Seth, I know you've heard from some, and Dan and I have too. They find it a disgrace. These are the ones that voted for him because they know all of them are taking a hit reputation-wise for this horrible outcome.
No doubt. And I also bet that, as people start asking, the voters about this, we'll learn that Belichick actually got 50 votes. Wink, wink. Because they'll all say, I don't know how it happened. I voted for him.
Right. You know, it's kind of the opposite thing has happened. They say, in the Baseball Hall of Fame over the years with the veterans committees, where people would vote for somebody because they didn't want them to be embarrassed not getting a vote. And then all of a sudden there were all these votes and you get people in the Baseball Hall of Fame who are unworthy. This seems like it might've been partially the opposite of that kind of a situation where people didn't feel they had to vote for him because they thought it was a foregone conclusion. That's one possibility. We keep talking about the different possibilities. I mean, reaction. First of all, I do want to note for the record, right? Armando Salguero reported that he read a note from Tom Brady strongly endorsing Bill Belichick for the Hall of Fame. It was read in the meeting. This is why Bill Belichick should be in the Hall of Fame. That's interesting.
What's Brady know? What's he know?
What does Tom Brady know? Exactly. Yeah. He barely worked with him. Where does this go from here? What is this story going to die down now? Or do we think that there are some legs to this now?
Well, I think the next chapter of the story is Kraft get in instead of Belichick. And that's going to open up a drama fest in Foxborough, the palace intrigue of exactly how the owner got in before the coach. Whether there is anything there or not doesn't matter. Just as you can say, I don't know that anyone really voted because Belichick used to be gruff in press conferences. It's a fair question to ask, right? So does Kraft get in? I'm not a believer that owners should be in at all. They get in a contributor role, but there were 16 owners in this thing, including Jerry Jones. And you can't argue, especially with another Super Bowl, which wasn't set when they were doing their figuring, that Robert Kraft deserves to get in by the standard of his predecessors. It's not really a close call the same way.
And I honestly think that if they had the seniors and contributors category now, I don't know if Jerry would have gotten in. I don't think Pat Bowlen would have gotten in. I mean, I think that it is a real room of misfits that they're choosing from. And I think that that's where you really have to set this apart and judge people against their peers. And as we know, when it comes to coaching, at least in the Super Bowl era, Bill Belichick has no peer.
Well, he doesn't. And Jeremy, it's a bad system. I mean, to include a coach, a contributor, and then 3 senior players all in the same committee, and you can only vote for 3. You're setting up the voters actually for bad outcomes. This is a horrific outcome, but there's been bad outcomes in the past with the way the system is, and I know because my phone has not stopped going off the hook since our story, and this was with some voters. They want to change the system. So I do think one legacy of this is this may be the last time you see coaches, contributors, and senior players in the same committee. There will be changes for sure after this year.
Yeah, and disproving the adage that all publicity is good publicity, right? Seth Wickersham, Don Van Natta, Dan Wetzel. Thank you. I mean, my blood's boiling right now. I'm sure you guys are feeling the same. Thanks for joining us on the Sports Reporters.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Thanks, Jeremy.